By using layer modes, or blending modes as they are known in some other applications like Photoshop, you can combine the contents or the pixels of the layers to each other to create some amazing results. Let's see how they work. In this example, I just have this footage of the wheel here. If I just go and play it, this is what it looks like. I'm going to pause it. And on top of this, I got one layer called fireworks. I'll just go and turn this on. And this is what that layer looks like now. And on top of that, I got a film strip layer, which looks like this. And on top of that, I'll get a paper texture, which looks like this. So I'm going to turn both of these off, so I only have the fireworks left. Now, in order to access the layer modes, you need to go and click on one of these buttons here under the word mode. If you can't see this column, you may need to come and click on this button here, where it says toggle, switches, and modes. So I'll click on this. You see by default, this is what you should be seeing, the switches. But if you click back on this button, or on the keyboard, this is F4, you'll now see the modes. Now, like I said, we use modes to combine layers to each other. In this case, we have this layer of the fireworks, and let's say I want to get rid of the black background. Now, if I open up my opacity, if I select the layer first, then press T to open up opacity, if I lower this down, yes, I'm seeing some of the clip in the background, but that's not quite what I'm after. I want to leave the top layer completely opaque, except for the black parts. I want the black parts to disappear. Well, that's an example when you can use blending modes or layer modes. So, if I go here and click on where it says normal, you'll see that we have a ton of different layer modes. We won't go through every single one by one, but I'll explain 3 categories here that I think will be most useful. The first category is the add or lighten category. Basically, any one of these options here, from add to lighter color, what will happen when you select any one of these is that the black pixels in the image will disappear and you'll be left with everything else. If I now go to add, you see now that the blacks are gone and I'm left with the rest of the image. If I now go and place this here, you can see the fireworks are there now. So if I now go push this back, and it will just play normally without the blacks. Now that's what the add category does, or the lighten category does. Now the rest of them, going from add down to lighter color, will do pretty much the same thing. So they'll all get rid of the black backgrounds, or black pixels I should say, and leaving you with everything that's not black, but with slightly different variations. For example, if I choose lighten, the result is a little more contrasty. If I choose, for example, instead of lighten, screen, we now have an in-between look. So it's between add and lighten screen. And the rest will do the same thing like I said, but the results are going to be slightly different. So the blacks are going to be gone, but the remaining pixels are going to look a little bit different each time. If I choose, let's say, color dodge, you see the pixels look even more contrasty and more saturated. So for now, I'll just leave this on add, and that is the lighten or the add category. Let me just go and turn on the other clip here. Let's say we want to do exactly the opposite here. So if I now go and play it, you see this is what we have. So these are some film strips going past. Let's say in this case, I want to get rid of only the whites, and I want to be left with everything that's not white, including the grays and the blacks. Well, that would be done in the darken category here. So if I come up here to darken, you see all the whites have disappeared, and I'm now left with everything that wasn't white. And the rest of these, inside the same category, inside the darken category, from darken to darker color, like I said, we'll do the same thing. They'll all get rid of the whites, but they'll look slightly different every time. If I choose multiply, for example, this is going to create a slightly softer result. You can see if I go back to darken, and if you take a look at the edges, they look a bit more harsh. But if I go back to multiply, they're a bit softer. And the rest of these in the same category, in the darken category, are going to be doing the same thing, but with slightly different variations. So if I choose, for example, linear burn, this is going to create a bit more contrast around the edges here, look. I'll undo this to go back to multiply. And the last one I want to show you is this. If I go and turn this layer on, you see I now have a paper texture here. Let's say in this case, we want to get rid of all the gray pixels, exactly 50% gray pixels, and then be left with everything that's darker than gray and everything that's lighter than gray. So that would be done by going to the mode of the paper texture, change it from normal to one of these here in the middle that start from overlay down to hard mix. These are called the contrast category. So if I now choose overlay, you see that everything that was darker than 50% gray makes the image underneath darker, and everything that was lighter than 50% gray makes the image lighter. So if I go turn this off and back on and off, you can see the difference now. The overall result looks a bit too bright. That's because most of my layer was brighter than 50% gray. So if I go back, set this back to overlay, and let's say I apply an effect to it. Let's say if I go and apply brightness and contrast to this, I can now make this gray layer a little darker by bringing the brightness down. and it will make the results darker again. So this is without the layer, this is with the layer. And the other options here, under the same category, are going to create the same result with slightly different variations each time. So if I choose soft light, for example, the effect won't be as harsh. If I go to soft light instead of overlay, you see this dials the effect down a little bit. So as you can see, by using layer modes, you can combine the contents of the layers together to create results which would otherwise be impossible.